Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Race here on Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. Two segments today as we look at, one, climate change, and two, defense of a country and what is happening around the world. And we're going to listen to Bill Blair, the Minister of Defense, as he talks about what that actually means and what it looks like, because when you become a global power, you can no longer sit back and say, oh, that's happening over there, we're isolated from that, and leave it alone. That isn't exactly true. And in the case of the Hamas kidnappings, there were Canadians affected, directly affected. One man from BC at a concert was literally killed. And there were others who were kidnapped. So how does a global nation act and defend its citizens from conflicts that are happening around the world? And how do they, because these happenings are also, these incidents are also happening to allies. How do you protect your allies or stand with your allies and not put your own country in jeopardy? Is that possible? And that's part of what Bill Blair is going to be talking about in a keynote presentation that he gave. So then we're back to climate change. And we are back to, hey, Canada is getting failing grades on climate change. And the federal minister of climate change is saying, no, we're actually on track. But if Canada is on track, then why is it that at the next COP presentations that Canada is saying that they're behind, that they are not on track? Why is the international community saying that they're not? Why is Minister Guilbeault getting failing grades for what it is he is doing? And why is he not just simply owning up to it? Instead, he is spinning them off like he is the hero. It's a good question, and it is a question that Stephen Guilbeault is avoiding. As a matter of fact, in the next talk that we're going to hear him in their new laws banning ivory and rhino horn and other elephant and rhino products, because hey, all these things are being used to such a point that that poachers are just taking down rhinos and elephants to the point that there may be a small number of wild elephants left, and on the rhino side, it is like, because there's not that many rhinos in captivity either, that the rhino population won't even be in captivity, be held alive in captivity. They will go absolutely extinct. Period. Done. So there's some new legislation that it has been long awaited, and probably should have been in place years ago, that would ban private trafficking of rhino horn, ivory products, and elephant bone products. The idea is, if we end the market, we'll end the hunting. And it is a very brave move on the part of the Canadian government to block all of these products from entering the Canadian borders. So we're going to, that is mainly why Stephen Guilbeault and others are speaking, is about the ban of elephant, ivory, and rhino horn products, and they're even going to be joined by way of video message from a activist in Kenya, where a lot of these products are leaving Africa from, as they're trying to stop the mass killing of these wonderful animals. So why don't we start off? We're going to go to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and we're going to listen to Bill Blair as he talks about the need to stand with our allies and put the right defense measures in place, and what it all really means to the world, what it means to Canadians. So let's listen to that first.
Well, Peter, first of all, thank you for that very kind introduction. And it was Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin who told me when I was appointed to this job, he called me and said, "You've now got the toughest job in government, but it's also the best job in government." And he was absolutely right. Ministers, ambassadors, members of parliament, members of the congressional delegation, General Eyre, members of our Canadian Armed Forces, Deputy Matthews, distinguished guests, welcome to you all. To those who are visiting to Canada, you are most welcome, and we are very honored. And I also wanted to acknowledge Peter MacKay and his leadership in bringing us here to Halifax, because it's a great place to be. Well done, Peter. I'm very honored by the opportunity. It truly is a privilege to join Peter as my co-host to welcome you all to the Halifax International Security Forum, which is taking place on the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And as Peter mentioned, this is my first trip to the Halifax Forum, but I want to assure you all that the reputation of this extraordinary event well precedes it. It's a reputation dating back 15 years as the world's foremost security conference for democracies. Peter, you thanked a lot of people. Allow me the opportunity to say thank you to you. You have kept the idea of this forum alive and prospering and relevant and important for 15 years. And over that 15 years, I believe you have contributed very significantly to an important dialogue from among like-minded nations. And as we've seen, as the video showed us, the global security challenges have evolved rather significantly over the past 15 years. We're seeing increasing threats to the rules-based international order. We're seeing rapid technological advances. We're seeing how climate change is increasing demand for our Canadian Armed Forces here at home and abroad. And of course, we're seeing, for the last 15 months of war in Ukraine, conflict in the Middle East, and rising tensions in the Indo-Pacific. Now, we are very fortunate in Canada to be some considerable distance from many of these conflicts. But as our world is becoming increasingly interconnected, we cannot benefit solely from our isolation from those conflicts, because as Peter indicated, we all have a responsibility. And these global challenges have a direct impact on Canadians. The impact on our security, on our families abroad, on our costs of living, and on our future, the future world that we will leave to our kids and our grandkids. In challenging times like these, Canada's position must remain clear. Freedom matters. Democracy matters. Sovereignty matters. And as the international rule-based order that has kept us safe is being challenged, those rules matter. Freedom must prevail. And for our citizens, we have an obligation to strengthen those rules and to uphold that order. I am convinced that together we can strengthen these international rules that keep us all safe, and we can meet the security challenges of today and of tomorrow. But let's be frank, we have a great deal of work to do. And that requires remarkable alliances like NATO and NORAD. It requires personnel, readiness, and it's going to require significant investment. It requires frank discussion that we have and what we have come to expect here in Halifax as the leading security conference of democracies. A month and a half ago on October 7th, Israel was brutally attacked by the terrorist organization Hamas. Approximately 1,200 Israeli citizens were slaughtered, and over 200 Israeli and foreign nationals were taken hostage, including citizens of many of the countries represented here today. We've all seen the heartbreaking footage from Israel over the last month. Families torn apart, parents who've lost their young children, innocent people kidnapped during a day of celebration. And I want to be very clear. Canada unequivocally condemns this terror attack, and we unwaveringly support Israel's right to defend itself in accordance with international law. Allow me to reiterate our Prime Minister's call for Hamas to immediately release all hostages held in Gaza. And last week, the House of Commons, and as Peter mentioned, many of my parliamentary colleagues from all parties are here today, we unanimously passed a motion calling upon the same effect. The price of justice cannot be the suffering of innocent civilians, and the protections of civilians remains paramount. But Hamas must stop using Palestinian civilians as human shields. And as we've all seen the terrible images of humanitarian situation in Gaza, we are making every effort to provide humanitarian assistance. We reiterate the need to ensure safe and unimpeded access to life-saving humanitarian aid for civilians in Gaza, and that aid can flow safely. Since October of this year, the Canadian Armed Forces, and I want to say thanks, General, have been there to assist Canadians in the region. Our military evacuated over 1,600 Canadians and permanent residents from Israel. And we were also assisted in the evacuation of 360 Canadians from Gaza. And should the regional situation escalate, we are also prepared to evacuate Canadians from Lebanon if that's what's required. Hundreds of Canadian Armed Forces personnel are deployed in the region, and a task force headquarters has been set up in Cyprus. Canada will continue to support a two-state solution so that both Israel and Palestinians can live in a lasting peace. In Ukraine, members of the Armed Forces of Ukraine continue to fight for Ukraine's freedom in the face of Russia's illegal and unprovoked war. Ukraine did not ask for this war. They did not provoke this war. But Ukraine must win this war. To strengthen Ukraine's position on the battlefield, our country, like many like-minded countries, have made significant investments in military aid to Ukraine and other financial aids that that country is going to need to prevail in everything from tanks and armored vehicles to howitzers and ammunition. We've also been fortunate since 2015 to be involved in an initiative to train Ukraine's military. I had the opportunity, an extraordinary opportunity, to visit the UK and to go to Camp Lyd, where Canadian Armed Forces members are working alongside their British counterparts in training Ukrainian soldiers to be better prepared to survive the rigors and the risks of the battlefield. Watching the interaction between our Armed Forces members and those Ukrainian citizens was an inspiration. But it reminds us all of the importance to continue to provide that military assistance to allow Ukraine to protect itself in every way possible. In addition to some of those assistance in training, for example, we are also providing Ukraine with systems to protect it from hostile cyber activity, a new front in the battlefield. And Canada regularly shares intelligence with Ukraine, including information about these cyber threats. As many in this room will know all too well, the cyber domain has become a key battleground in this conflict, and we're making critical contributions and will continue to do so to ensure Ukraine's success. And Ukraine is making progress, but it requires us to work together and to continue our support. As NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has said, we are all paying a price for Russia's war against Ukraine, but the price many of us pay is in money and material. The price Ukrainians pay is in blood. And if we let Putin win, all of us, as Peter has said, will pay a much higher price for many, many years to come. We must and we will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes, with whatever is required. As a founding member of NATO, our commitment to collective defense has been and will always be unwavering. Canada is more than doubling its military presence in the alliance eastern flank, with up to 2,200 troops to be persistently deployed through Operation Reassurance in Latvia. And as many of you are aware, Canada also shares vital cyber data with our NATO allies, including Latvia, where we've deployed military and civilian personnel to help protect critical networks. But we know that more must be done. And even though we are across the Atlantic, we are under no illusions. Europe's security is Canada's security. And given the threats that we currently face, we believe that the NATO alliance and that partnership is more important than ever. I also want to acknowledge Canada must and will do more. In the Indo-Pacific, we also have a great deal of work to do, and as a Pacific nation ourselves, Canada has a deep interest in maintaining a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific, particularly in maintaining the freedom of navigation on international waterways. We know that Canada's participation must move from an episodic presence in the region to a reliable and persistent presence, and that's exactly why we're deploying more ships, aircraft, and personnel to the region. In 2023, for the very first time, Canada deployed 3 warships into the Indo-Pacific. There they conducted exercises with our allies and our partners, including the United States, South Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and others. And I'm proud to say that this additional warship came from right here in Halifax. And whether we were monitoring UN sanctions against North Korea or sailing through the international waters of the Taiwan Strait, partnerships matter. And this forum helps build and maintain those partnerships. And as we operate in the Indo-Pacific, Canada will always defend international rules and engage responsibly. We expect others to do the same. Unfortunately, I have to share with you that in the past few weeks, we have seen unsafe aerial intercepts conducted by the People's Republic of China. On October 16th, a Canadian maritime patrol aircraft monitoring United Nations sanctions against North Korea was unsafely intercepted by a Chinese fighter, which came within 5 meters of our aircraft. And only a few weeks later, on October 29th, another Canadian maritime helicopter had 2 unsafe encounters with Chinese aircraft, one of which launched flares directly in front of our helicopter. These actions put everyone at risk, and we have raised our concerns regarding this behavior in the past. We'll continue to do so, and we will continue to be a presence in the region. Our Indo-Pacific strategy is clear. China increasingly disregards international rules and norms. So Canada will continue to challenge China where we believe it is right, and we will cooperate with China when we must to find solutions to global issues. Canada has been clear in its commitment to our partners in the region, and for example, we are contributing to stability in the Korean Peninsula, and since the Korean War, the Canadian Armed Forces have continuously served in Korea through the United Nations Command to promote peace on the peninsula. And today, I'm very pleased to share with you that the Canadian Armed Forces' very own Lieutenant General Derek McCauley has been named the next Deputy Commander of the United Nations Command in the Republic of Korea. He will officially begin his duties shortly, and this is only the second time Canada has the privilege of participating at that level. We believe the Indo-Pacific strategy is central to our own country's security and prosperity, and I want to assure our allies we'll continue to work with all like-minded partners and allies to build freedom, openness, and stability in the region. And here at home, our Arctic sovereignty is being increasingly challenged by Russia and by China. Just 9 months ago, NORAD played a key role when a Chinese high-altitude surveillance balloon violated the sovereignty of our nation and the United States. And it reminds us all of the centrality of NORAD's security to our people. And as President Biden said when he visited Canada this year, NORAD is an incredible symbol of the faith that we have in one another and trust that we place in each other's capabilities. And to the United States congressional delegation joining us today, let me please say very clearly, we deeply value the unparalleled defense relationship between Canada and the United States, including and especially through NORAD. Canada is making generational investments to help modernize our NORAD capabilities. We're investing over $38 billion over the next 2 decades, but we recognize we must do more. We are starting to see these investments take shape. We're developing a new Arctic over-the-horizon radar system with improved threat detection in the north. At the beginning of this year, our government announced the acquisition of 88 F-35 fighter jets, an investment of $19 billion that I'm sure some would say was well overdue, but we're moving on that. We've closely engaged with our Arctic partners to upgrade our infrastructure so that they can host state-of-the-art fighter jets, and we are working to modernize the Canadian Armed Forces. We're continuing to implement our 2017 defense policy, Strong, Secure, and Engage, and which will increase our defense spending by over 70%. But again, let me say and reassure you all, Canada knows it must do more because the world has changed since 2017. The threat environment has grown significantly, and that's why we must move forward with our defense policy update. We have been engaging with Canadians, with industry, with our allies and our partners to make sure that we get this right. But we also recognize the urgency of those investments and the work that we must do together. We're focusing on capabilities that bring value to Canadians and to our key alliances. And for example, we know that the long-range precision strike capabilities will be essential to NATO. We know that underwater surveillance capabilities and Arctic defense infrastructure matter to NORAD. And we know that tactical aviation capabilities are essential in responding to emergencies here at home. In recent weeks, I've had the opportunity to meet with the aerospace industry, the Canadian Association of Defence and Security Industries, and other industry partners to discuss the defence policy update. I've heard their feedback, and I know that we need to provide you with the clarity and certainty that will enable you to help us. And although we are already investing in major new military capabilities in all domains, again, I will reiterate, additional investments are needed and will occur. We know that we need resources to put behind our aspirations, and as we do all of this, our people remain our #1 priority. And that's exactly why we are implementing Madam Justice Arbour's recommendations to ensure meaningful cultural change in our military. As Canada's Ambassador for Women, Peace and Security, Jacqueline O'Neill, has recently said, while receiving the Vimy Award just last week, diverse groups make better decisions, and when women participate, the outcomes are better. True operational effectiveness occurs when we reduce blind spots on situational awareness. Inclusion matters, respect matters, and we're going to make sure that we create a Canadian Armed Forces that is inclusive and respectful of all men and women who serve. I would like to also, if I may, and Peter's already done this, but I also want to take the opportunity to welcome this year's Peace and Women Fellows, who, as in previous years, take part in this weekend's discussion. Welcome. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to Irene Felon, Special Representative of the NATO Secretary General for Women, Peace and Security. And finally, if I may, let me say just a few words about our host city, the remarkable city of Halifax. To all Haligonians, it's not an easy word to say, by the way, your city is the beating heart of the defence of Canada. Just over a week ago, 2 Canadian ships returned to their home port here in Halifax after a month-long deployment with NATO in European waters. This morning, I had the opportunity to visit shipbuilders at Irving's Halifax shipyard, just a few kilometers from where we are standing. Halifax shipbuilders have already built and delivered 4 new Arctic and offshore patrol ships to the Navy. 2 more are currently under construction, and they'll soon begin construction on the first of 15 new warships for the Royal Canadian Navy through the Canadian Surface Combatant Project. This will be the largest Canadian shipbuilding initiative since World War II. This project is expected to create and maintain 10,000 jobs over 25 years. It's going to provide our Navy with modern state-of-the-art ships built right here in Canada to enable our Navy to live up to our international commitments. And right next to the Irving shipyard, thousands of civilians and military personnel who go to work every day at the Canadian Forces Base here in Halifax, the home of our Atlantic Fleet and Canada's largest military base. but it needs new facilities to meet the growing demands of our personnel. And so today, I have the opportunity to again announce that we're moving forward to build a brand new $188 million training center here at CFB Halifax. And this center is going to provide Canadian Armed Forces members with the expertise they're going to require in above water, underwater, and maritime air fighting so that they're ready to sail in our incoming fleet of 15 Canadian surface combat ships when they finally come off the line. We've awarded the Ellis Don Corporation with a contract to design this facility, and we're hoping it will be completed by 2029. And for those of you who don't know, that was our Halifax area MPs who were applauding first. This is good news for Halifax, but it's also good news for the Navy. It's good news for the Canadian Armed Forces, because I hope it demonstrates to them that we are prepared to make investments in them, and to provide them with state-of-the-art equipment while they await the arrival of these new ships. Halifax is also home to an impressive defense research and innovation network. It is now the home to Defense Research and Development Agency's Canada's Atlantic facility, which provides world-class expertise in areas like underwater acoustics research. It's home to several universities in Cove, a center of marine technology and innovation. And as my predecessor, Minister Anand, announced last year, Halifax will soon be home to NATO's Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic, or DIANA. And today, we are making an additional investment of $26.6 million over 6 years to enable the opening and operation of DIANA's North American regional office here in Halifax. And this investment is going to allow, this investment is going to allow DIANA to open in Halifax by next summer. And it's going to make sure that innovators have the place and the funding required to develop dual-use technologies that will both have civilian and military use. It's good for the Canadian Armed Forces. I hope it's going to be good for all of our efforts. This spring, DIANA launched its first ever competitive call for proposals. Rather proudly, Canada had the second highest number of applications at 211, just a few behind the United States. And we know that by bolstering Canadian innovation and investing in our defense industrial base, we're going to make it better able to support the Canadian Armed Forces and better able to support our allies. And as the nature of conflict changes, we will need to innovate, to adapt across all domains, on sea, on land, in the air, but on cyber and in space. And we need to invest in game-changing technologies like AI and quantum. That's exactly what DIANA is going to do for us here in Halifax. I would take the opportunity to acknowledge Andy Fillmore, who represents the area, for his strong advocacy in getting that here. Canada's proud of being able to support that. We will continue to make major investments here in Halifax and right across the country. And I want to assure you all, Canada understands its responsibility to continue to invest in the Canadian Armed Forces, to make sure it is prepared, resourced, and equipped to do the important job of keeping our country safe. To everyone who is joining us here in Halifax for this remarkable conference, quite clearly we all have a great deal of work to do. And at times like this, conferences like this matter. Threats to international stability are on the rise, and in the face of those threats, we've got to work together. We must learn from each other, and we must share our experiences in the Middle East and in Europe, in the Indo-Pacific, here in North America, and around the globe. We must step up to address these challenges to preserve peace and prosperity for our peoples. Together, I believe and I am confident that we can build a safer world. We can stand up to those who are trying to sow chaos and division. We can ensure that our militaries are ready to face the threats of tomorrow. And ultimately, we can protect and strengthen the rules-based international order that keeps us all safe. We clearly have a lot of work to do. And so with that, delegates of the 2023 Halifax International Security Forum, it is my privilege and pleasure as your co-host to officially hand the floor over to you. Let's get to work.
Okay, so let's move on to the banning of rhino horn and elephant tusk ivory products, and what that actually means for the global market and what it means for Canada as animal activists.
Alors, bonjour à toutes et à tous. Good afternoon. Je souhaiterais d'abord reconnaître que nous nous trouvons sur le territoire non cédé de la nation Algonquin Anishinaabe. Merci à vous toutes et tous de vous joindre à nous aujourd'hui pour une annonce emballante sur un sujet qui nous tient beaucoup à cœur, la protection des espèces sauvages. Je suis ici donc avec Kelly Butler, qui est directrice de la campagne sur les espèces sauvages pour le Humane Society International. Les éléphants et les rhinocéros sont des espèces essentielles. Ils jouent un rôle majeur dans le maintien de l'équilibre naturel. Sans eux, des écosystèmes entiers seraient radicalement différents ou pourraient même disparaître. Leurs habitudes alimentaires et leurs déplacements contribuent à maintenir l'équilibre des écosystèmes et à créer de nouveaux habitats pour des animaux comme les antilopes, les zèbres et les gnous, ainsi que pour des animaux plus petits et des insectes. Les éléphants peuvent par exemple parcourir plus de 80 km par jour et lorsqu'il pleut, leurs grandes empreintes deviennent des puits pour que de plus petits animaux utilisent comme point d'eau. Ces animaux majestueux sont des herbivores importants car ils consomment de grandes quantités de végétaux et contribuent ainsi à façonner le paysage africain. Lorsqu'ils mangent, ils arrachent de l'herbe et des buissons et créent ainsi de l'espace pour permettre de nouvelles plantes de croître. Ils répandent des graines de plantes dans de nouvelles zones grâce à leurs excréments. Tout ceci contribue au maintien d'un équilibre sain au cœur de l'écosystème et est avantageux pour d'autres animaux. Les communautés locales dépendent également des ressources naturelles, de l'habitat des éléphants et des rhinocéros pour se nourrir, se ravitailler en combustible et gagner leur vie. Elephants and rhinoceros are two of Africa's big five, most attractive and popular species for tourists, and ecotourism is an important source of income for local people. I myself had the opportunity to spend some time in Kruger National Park in South Africa and will cherish those memories all my life. But both these keystone species are under threat. Since 1980, the number of elephants in Africa has fallen from over 1 million to approximately 415,000, a decline of 70%. Similarly, all rhinoceros population have declined drastically in spite of being internationally protected since 1977. These declines are caused by illegal killing and poaching, human and wildlife conflict, habitat destruction, climate change, illegal logging, and infrastructure and development. Many countries, including Canada, are concerned about the decline of elephant and rhinoceros populations. To help stop illegal poaching, we've put in place trade controls for elephant ivory and rhinoceros horns, which are stricter than those required by CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. In recent years, Canada's largest trading partners have called upon the global community to take further action. That's why, today, I'm happy to announce that the Government of Canada is putting in place stricter measures for the trade of elephant ivory and rhinoceros horn. These measures will further limit the ability to transport these products across Canadian borders and increase their monitoring. Our country implements its CITES obligations to the trade of elephant ivory and rhinoceros horn through permitting systems for imports, exports, and re-exports. The stricter measures we're announcing today will result in the prohibition on the import and export of raw elephant ivory and rhinoceros horn with very limited exceptions. For example, import or export will be allowed with a permit when destined for a museum or zoo, for the use in scientific research, or for use in support of law enforcement. These new measures will make the import of elephant ivory and rhinoceros horn hunting trophies illegal. And we're implementing stricter permit requirements for the import of ivory or horn that is no longer raw by removing exemptions for household items and personal effects. These stricter measures will be enforced as of January 8, 2024. Aujourd'hui, je suis donc heureux d'annoncer que le gouvernement du Canada met en place des mesures plus strictes pour le commerce de l'ivoire, d'éléphants et des cornes de rhinocéros, ce qui permettra de mieux encadrer les modalités de transport de ces produits traversant les frontières canadiennes et renforcera leur contrôle. Ces mesures plus strictes seront en vigueur à partir du 8 janvier 2024. Notre pays s'oppose fermement à l'abattage illicite et au braconnage des animaux sauvages. Nous ne pouvons pas rester les bras croisés en voyant disparaître les espèces sauvages. Il faut agir en renforçant notre réponse pour contrer le commerce illégal. C'est pourquoi, dans le cadre de ma lettre de mandat 2021, le premier ministre m'a demandé de travailler avec des partenaires afin de lutter contre le commerce illégal des espèces sauvages. Aujourd'hui, je suis donc fier de franchir cette étape importante pour la protection de deux espèces que nous chérissons, les éléphants et les rhinocéros. Notre pays continuera à travailler de manière proactive avec la communauté internationale pour trouver des solutions concrètes qui permettent de lutter efficacement contre le commerce illégal et de soutenir clairement la conservation de ces espèces sauvages. Ensemble, nous protégeons et conservons les espèces en péril dans le monde entier. Et nous faisons notre part pour protéger et conserver les espèces sauvages précieuses de la planète pour les générations futures. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to recognize the incredible efforts of the Canadian government, including both Minister Guilbeault and Minister Wilkinson, and all of the staff at the ministry who worked under two different environment ministers to get this done. Because of their hard work, and because of our supporters, all the scientists, NGOs, journalists, and Canadians who came together to speak up for elephants and rhinos, today we have made history. For years, Humane Society International has been at the forefront of a global campaign to end elephant ivory and rhino horn trade. Here in Canada, we have been working alongside the government to end this trade in our country. We're so thrilled to be here today to celebrate these historic measures. Elephant and rhino populations have been decimated by global trade in their parts. In the last century alone, African elephant populations have plummeted a staggering 96%, and most species of rhino are critically endangered. These species are all at risk of becoming extinct within decades if urgent global action is not taken to disincentivize poaching. Beyond perpetuating the demise of elephant and rhino populations, poaching and trophy hunting cause enormous suffering to these incredible animals and their families. Canada's new regulations will be some of the strongest protections for elephants and rhinos in non-range states. Critically, these regulations will also ban the import of hunting trophies containing elephant ivory and rhino horn alongside commercial trade in these parts, sending the message that elephants and rhinos are not commodities. In putting forward these measures, the Canadian government has reflected both the will of Canadians and of the vast majority of African nations holding elephant populations. Again, thank you to the Canadian government and to all of the Canadians and people around the world who stood up for elephants and rhinos. Canadians can now rest assured that Canada is doing its part to end the senseless killing of elephants and rhinos and to protect these iconic species for future generations. I would now like to present a video sent to us by Dr. Winnie Kiiru, who could not join us today, but who wanted to congratulate Canada and share a few words of her own. Dr. Kiiru is a renowned African elephant conservationist who is behind one of the largest, or rather the largest, elephant ivory burn in history, which took place in Kenya in 2016. In 2022, Dr. Kiiru was awarded the Order of the Grand Warrior, one of the highest civilian honors in Kenya, for her work in wildlife conservation. Without further ado, here is Dr. Kiiru.
My name is Dr. Winnie Kiiru. I'm the Executive Director of Mpala Research Center in Kenya. I'm sorry I wasn't able to join you today for your celebration. I just want to give a huge congratulations to Canada for the legislation that they've just enacted. It's really amazing for us in countries that host elephants to know that countries around the world are looking at their legislation and making sure that they make it difficult for ivory and rhino horn to be sold in their countries. So a huge congratulations to Canada. I have worked for many years advocating for elephants because really the killing of elephants, poaching of elephants has to do with the buying. When the buying stops, the killing will too. Now, poaching, rhino horn trade, sale of those products that has gone on in the world since time immemorial have probably contributed the most to the loss of elephants in the natural wild. The extinction of elephants will most definitely be contributed to by poaching and rhino horn trade. I participated in my country. I was the project leader at the time when the president asked Kenya Wildlife Service to destroy over 100 tons of ivory. It was a sad moment for me because some of the tasks I was banning I could see from the codes that these were Amboseli elephants. I was banning tusks from elephants that I probably knew when they were alive. I cannot forget the smell of death that I had to live with for weeks as we carried out that exercise. But Kenya was able to communicate to the world that ivory belongs to elephants. There is absolutely no value in a dead elephant. There is absolutely no way we are going to combat poaching until the buying stops. So I congratulate Canada and I congratulate everybody who has taken steps in creating awareness, in ensuring that this legislation has been passed. And I want to say it doesn't stop at passing legislation. There is work to do in enforcing that legislation, in making sure that those who go against that law, they meet the full force of the law. So I congratulate Canada, and I wish I was there with you, but now that I'm not, I just want to say the elephants celebrate you as well. Thank you very much. Dr. Winnie Kiiru from Kenya.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Heather Craig, and I'm honored to be speaking at this momentous event on behalf of Rhino and Elephant Defenders, of which I am a director. We are part of the Ivory Free Canada Coalition, which was responsible for initiating the Ivory Free Canada campaign that included a petition that garnered over 700,000 signatures, a letter to the Canadian government asking to end the domestic trade of elephant ivory and rhino horn in Canada, signed by numerous NGOs, scientists, celebrities, and conservationists, and individually holding marches, giving media interviews and publications, and advocating tirelessly for the past 10 years to get to this point. Our voices, together with the Canadian people, advocating for the preservation of elephants and rhinos, have been unanimous, collective, and verbose.
Bonjour tout le monde, mon nom est Janine Cavin et je suis aussi membre du conseil d'administration de Rhino and Elephant Defenders. En mon nom personnel et au nom de la coalition, j'aimerais remercier le gouvernement canadien d'avoir promulgué ces nouveaux règlements qui mettront fin au commerce de l'ivoire d'éléphant et de la corne de rhinocéros au Canada. Qu'il y aurait un petit groupe de Canadiens et de Canadiennes qui ne se connaissaient pas, mais qui avaient pour but la protection des éléphants, puissent travailler ensemble, inspirer d'autres personnes partageant les mêmes idées et voir leurs rêves se réaliser. Avec humilité et reconnaissance, et au nom des éléphants et des rhinocéros, merci.
Okay, so we will now go to questions. One question, one follow-up. Sarah Sears, CBC.
Good afternoon, Minister. If you'll permit me to ask a different question. The new UN Environment Program report out today says that governments needs to move faster on lowering emissions, as much as 42%. I wonder if you can talk about how realistic it is that Canada can achieve that, especially when you have pushback from premiers on the carbon tax and the Alberta Premier pushing, back on the timeline for net zero.
So if you go back to our emissions reduction plan from last year, showed that we're basically 75% en route to meeting our 2030 commitment, the lower end of that commitment, minus 40%. What I said at the time and what I've continued saying since is that we need to do more and we need to do it faster. And since the emissions reduction plan was presented, we've put in place new regulations for clean fuel standards to ensure that the fuel that Canadians consume has the lowest possible carbon footprint. We've presented draft regulations for zero emission vehicle mandate. We've presented draft regulations for the clean electricity regulations. We've phased out fossil fuel subsidies, the first country in the G20 to do that. And we've even committed to go beyond fossil fuel subsidies to public financing. No other G20 country has made that commitment. That's all in the last year and a half, roughly. So we are doing exactly what we're being asked to do, accelerate the deployment of measures to fight climate change to get to our target and beyond the 40%. As to the second part of your question, imagine what we could do as a country if we worked together on that. If if the debate was not as to whether or not we need to fight climate change, unfortunately, like some politicians, certainly Pierre Poilievre and some provincial premiers are doing, but if we all pushed in the same direction, Canada could be an international leader. And I think we're getting there slowly when you see the progress that has been made, but we could do so much more if we work together.
And secondly, can I get your reaction to the federal court's ruling on plastics, and will the federal government be appealing it?
So we intend to appeal the ruling. I mean, science, the body of scientific evidence showing the impacts on human health, on the environment of plastic pollution is undebatable. And the Canadian public has been asking us to do this. And we've seen municipalities across the country, we've seen provinces put in place legislation to reduce plastic pollution. I think Canadians are tired of seeing plastic pollution in their neighborhood, in our streets, in our environment, clogging our waterways, polluting our oceans. We've all seen those images of wildlife, whether it's seabirds, turtles, various forms of fish, whales caught or dying because of plastic pollution. This has to stop. And contrary to what Pierre Poilievre has said, I mean, we're not banning all plastics. It's ridiculous. There are tens of thousands of plastics items in our economy. We've banned 6 single-use plastics items for which they are alternatives, but single-use plastics that were harmful to our environment. And we will continue with our strategy to fight plastic pollution. We want to get plastic out of our environment, out of our neighborhoods, out of humans. I mean, we're finding microbeads of plastics in our brains. It's affecting fetuses. It's affecting the growth of our kids. We have to put a stop to that. We want to ensure that plastic stays in the economy, and we move towards a circular economy when it comes to the use of plastics, to keeping them out of our landfills, out of our environment, and that's what we will do.
Davis Legree, iPolitics.
Thanks. Sorry to keep us off topic, but Mr. Guilbeault, are we going to see anything on the oil and gas emissions cap before COP28?
We're, as you will remember, the Prime Minister said that we would have a framework for the oil and gas cap by the end of the year. Working really hard to make this as soon as possible. There's still some work to be done, but definitely before the end of the year.
And, you know, this is an older poll, but I don't believe you've been asked about it yet. I don't know if you saw last week, Angus Reid had a survey that asked Canadians what party they want to be in charge or manage climate change. And 28% of respondents said the Conservatives, compared to only 14% who said the Liberals. And I'm just wondering what you take away from those results if you did indeed see that survey.
I did not see that survey.
Can you kind of speak to the idea that perhaps more Canadians are more interested in seeing the Conservatives take the lead on climate change in spite of kind of the verbal sparring you and Pierre Poilievre have had over each other's visions for climate?
I can't comment something I haven't seen, but what I can say is that I think as Canadians get to know better Pierre Poilievre and understand better his positions on many of these things, whether it's protecting the environment, whether it's fighting climate change, I think more and more Canadians will grow very concerned about what they're seeing, and the idea that someone who aspired to become Prime Minister of Canada doesn't even believe in climate change, let alone put any measures in place to fight climate change, and would just tell communities and municipalities affected by climate impacts, well, tough luck, because we're not there for you. We're going to make pollution free again. We're going to make it easier for big polluters to pollute even more. I don't think Canadians would be very happy about that.
Juliane Lapointe, Radio-Canada.
Bonjour. À la veille de l'énoncé économique, le NPD dit qu'il faut enlever la TPS sur le chauffage. Les conservateurs, eux, c'est d'éliminer la tarification sur le carbone. Vous, d'un point de vue environnemental, qu'est-ce qui serait acceptable comme mesure pour donner un répit aux familles canadiennes?
En fait, comme l'a très bien indiqué la Banque du Canada, ce serait une erreur de faire une adéquation entre le prix sur la pollution et la question de l'inflation, puisque selon la Banque du Canada, la tarification carbone ne contribue que pour 0,1-0,5% à l'inflation. Donc, ça a un impact marginal sur le coût de la vie. Et dans les provinces où le programme fédéral s'applique, 8 ménages sur 10 reçoivent plus d'argent qu'ils n'en payent. Ce que l'on sait, c'est que la tarification carbone, ce n'est pas la seule mesure que nous avons pour lutter contre les changements climatiques, mais c'est l'une des meilleures. Et présentement, au Canada, d'ici 2030, ça va contribuer pour quelque part entre 20 et 30 % à l'atteinte de nos objectifs. Donc, c'est un outil majeur de lutte au changement climatique. Si on enlève ça, moi, je ne vois pas comment le Canada peut atteindre ses objectifs de 2030. Ça fait 2 ans que je suis au ministère et qu'on regarde vraiment, on a soulevé toutes les pierres pour voir quelles sont les autres mesures qu'on pourrait faire, et on va en annoncer quelques-unes de nouvelles, dont le plafond sur les émissions de gaz à effet de serre du secteur du pétrole et du gaz sous peu. Mais si on enlève 20 à 30 % de la solution, je ne vois pas comment le Canada peut atteindre ses objectifs.
Il y a Reuters qui dit que 20 milliards sur 5 ans seraient prévus en subvention pour la capture sur le carbone. Dans l'énoncé, ça reste une technologie quand même qui est loin d'avoir été éprouvée. Est-ce que vous êtes à l'aise avec ça?
Bien, je ne peux pas commenter sur ce que je n'ai pas vu, c'est-à-dire l'énoncé économique. On verra demain. Mais écoutez, je pense que sur la question de la capture et le stockage du carbone, je vous invite à regarder notre plan de l'an passé et la capture et le stockage du carbone, c'est une toute petite portion de notre plan de lutte au changement climatique. On mise pas là-dessus pour 25 %, pour 20 %, pour 15 %. Donc, c'est une fraction. C'est l'une des très nombreuses mesures que nous mettons en place pour lutter contre les changements climatiques. Par exemple, dans le secteur du pétrole et du gaz, il y a évidemment la tarification carbone pour les grands émetteurs, il y a la norme sur les carburants propres, il y a le règlement sur le méthane où les entreprises pétrolières et gazières devront réduire d'au moins 40 % leurs émissions de méthane d'ici 2025 et au moins 75 % d'ici 2030. Alors, toutes ces mesures-là n'ont rien à voir avec la capture et le stockage du carbone, mais en plus de ces mesures-là, on prévoit l'utilisation de la capture et du stockage du carbone. Je vous rappellerai que dans le dernier rapport du GIEC, le GIEC fait référence à cette technologie-là et l'Agence internationale de l'énergie également comme étant une technologie nécessaire à l'atteinte de nos objectifs de carboneutralité. Mais encore une fois, c'est l'une parmi de très nombreuses technologies. C'est pas ça qui va régler tous nos problèmes, mais ça va nous aider à régler une partie du problème.
Mia Rapson, Canadian Press.
Just on the elephant ban, I'm wondering if any of you would be able...
Sorry.
They freed me up to ask the question because they asked some of my other questions. So I'm just wondering if anyone could talk about what impact this will actually have in terms of what statistics do we know about how much elephant ivory or rhino tusks are actually imported, or how much the domestic trade in Canada contributes, and what impact this will have, as well as what other countries have already done this?
Yeah, I can speak to that for sure. So based on the most recent kind of CITES data, it's always a couple years behind because of data uploads, but between 2010 and 2019, Canada imported approximately 445 elephant tusks and a handful of rhino horns into the country legally. And, that's in addition to whatever illegal ivory or horn might have been smuggled within that. Of those 445 elephant tusks, the vast majority, so 95%, was actually classified as hunting trophies or for personal use. So that's why the regulations that Canada has put forward are effective and critical in that they ban the import of hunting trophies containing elephant ivory alongside a commercial ban in these parts. Whereas we've seen, for example, the UK has a commercial elephant ivory ban rather. However, they've yet to ban the import of hunting trophies containing these parts for a fulsome ban. So that's something that countries absolutely need to do, because any remaining channel where elephant ivory can be imported, regardless of its classification, creates a system that's just ripe for exploitation by wildlife traffickers and poachers.
Sorry, this isn't my follow, but you said 445 tusks illegally or legally?
Legally.
Legally, okay.
So effectively, these regulations would put an end to that.
And then, sorry to leave elephants, but the plastics treaty negotiations that just wrapped up in Kenya on the weekend didn't sound like they went too well, and Canada is hosting the next round. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts of what happened over the weekend and what this means for the talks that are happening in Canada in the spring.
So I was in touch with some of my peers. I haven't had a chance to be briefed by the department this morning on the negotiations, but I have been in touch with some colleagues from other countries who were there, including folks at UNEP. I mean, we're trying to do something that is probably unheard of in the history of the United Nations, to come up with a new international treaty, legally binding treaty, to ban plastic pollution in 2 years. I mean, that's light speed for any government. You know, to adopt a new law in Canada or a new regulation takes about 18 to 24 months. And now we're trying to come up with a new international treaty in 24. So I think no one was expecting this to be easy, to be simple. But I think there is an incredible momentum. When I was in New York in September, we had a meeting of the High Ambition Coalition to fight plastic pollution. The number of countries that are part of the High Ambition Coalition is growing. I wouldn't say by the day, but certainly growing. You know, there is an international movement. I mean, what we've seen here, the groundswell from the public, you know. The fight against plastic pollution started by Canadians, and then after people started saying, no, I don't need a plastic bag for this or that, then municipalities started putting in place bylaws, and then some provincial governments came on board. But it was really the public that started this movement. And what's true in Canada is true in many parts of the world as well. So we're being pushed by our people all around the world to do better on that. So I'm confident, you know, they will be in April. We will receive those countries here in Ottawa. It's going to be tough negotiations, but no one believed we could get an international agreement at COP15, let alone what many are referring to as an historic agreement for the protection of nature. We had 5 months to prepare for a COP. We've been working on the INC meeting next April already for many months, so we're in a better position to help the international community find those pathways towards success. So I'm very confident. And if I can, I mean, on today's announcement, I just want to thank all of the organizations and the work you've done, and the pressure you've put on us to do better as a government is essential in our democracy. I used to do that. It's so important. So I want to thank you and your supporters and your members and your employees and staff for all of the work you did that enabled us to be here today.
Mary Wolf, Globe and Mail.
Hi, I want to ask about elephants. Could you just talk a little bit about the penalties, what they are? Would the tusk, for example, be confiscated? And do you think the penalties are, a deterrent? Are they enough to stop people importing ivory or exporting it?
We have someone from the department who could give you details on. So we'll provide you with the answer to your question on specifically what the penalties are. Do we think they're sufficient deterrent? I mean, it's been a very useful tool to fight different environmental problems, monetary penalties, whether it's to companies or individuals. And I think our role as government is we're putting these new regulations in place. We will obviously assess how they're operating. We will be advised and pressured if they're not working adequately, and if we need to make changes. But I think it is a very useful tool in our fight to protect the environment. Not the only one, but certainly a very powerful one. Can someone from the department provide an answer to specifically the monetary penalty?
Yeah, maybe after.
Okay.
Yeah, they're a bit camera shy, so
Sure.
after.
And could you just clarify, please, what the position will be, for example, with antique ivory? I mean, 200 years ago, people made figurines. 100 years ago, many people have those in their sort of cabinet. Would it be illegal for them to trade in that, import it, take it overseas? What's the position with that?
They would need a permit to be able to do this. So there would be an assessment, What we're trying to do is to stop the poaching of elephants and rhinoceros, and which is why we're banning hunting trophies, for example. For products that are already in circulation, like musical instruments, for example, people will be able to take them out of the country, bring them into the country, but they will need a permit. Similarly to a passport application, for example. So because we want Kelly was talking about the importance of data, and we want to have a better understanding of what's happening on this, which is why this permitting system is so important.
Est-ce qu'il reste une question dans la salle? Mylène Crête, La Presse.
Bonjour. Vous avez parlé de l'importance de la taxe sur le carbone. Combien de mégatonnes de gaz à effet de serre est-ce qu'elle a permis de réduire depuis son implantation?
Bien, ce que je disais tout à l'heure, c'est qu'on estime que d'ici 2030, ce sera entre 20 et 30 %. On peut vous donner les chiffres là, exacts, là, mais c'est le département qui a rendu public des éléments d'analyse la semaine dernière, il y a 2 semaines, là-dessus, mais on peut vous fournir des chiffres plus détaillés que 20 à 30 %. Mais ça tourne autour de ça.
Ma deuxième question sur la taxe sur le carbone, les conservateurs ont quand même réussi à associer cette taxe-là à l'inflation. Leur message résonne, là, selon des récents sondages. Il y a de plus en plus de Canadiens qui voudraient une exemption pour d'autres types de chauffage que le mazout. Est-ce que vous pensez que le gouvernement a manqué dans son explication de cette mesure-là aux Canadiens?
Je pense que clairement, il y a une bonne partie de la population présentement qui fait face à des difficultés dues à l'inflation, dues à l'augmentation des taux d'intérêt. Et les conservateurs voudraient nous faire croire que tout ça est dû à la tarification carbone, ce qui est pas vrai. Alors, c'est pas parce qu'ils le disent et c'est pas parce qu'il y a des gens qui croient que ça change le fait que ce n'est pas vrai, que ça n'a rien à voir avec la réalité. Et est-ce qu'on peut faire mieux en termes de communiquer là-dessus? Je pense qu'on peut toujours faire mieux. Mais nous sommes déterminés à maintenir le cap en matière de lutte au changement climatique, parce que la réalité, c'est que les changements climatiques nous coûtent toutes et tous des milliards de dollars par année. Juste les rivières atmosphériques en Colombie-Britannique, l'an passé, c'est 5 milliards de dollars. Une catastrophe naturelle dans une province, à un moment donné, 5 milliards de dollars. Nous payons toutes et tous ces impacts-là. On n'a pas encore les chiffres totaux pour les feux de forêt, mais ça va se chiffrer dans les milliards de dollars. L'Institut canadien du climat estime que d'ici 2025, c'est plus de 20 milliards de dollars de coûts d'impact des changements climatiques que nous allons avoir à payer année après année. Et ça, Pierre Poilievre n'en parle jamais de ce coût-là, mais nous le payons toutes et tous. Alors, pour réduire les coûts des impacts des changements climatiques, bien, il faut continuer de travailler à lutter contre cette pollution-là. Et c'est pas quelque chose qui se fait en criant ciseaux. Il va falloir travailler là-dessus pendant des décennies, des années, voire quelques décennies pour y arriver. Mais il n'y a pas de solution magique, il n'y a pas d'interrupteur quelque part qu'on peut mettre à off, puis il n'y a plus de changement climatique, comme voudraient parfois nous laisser croire les conservateurs. C'est un problème global, c'est un problème qui est complexe, mais est-ce qu'on peut mieux communiquer? Moi, je pense que oui.
So, that last segment, we actually did hear a number of questions from the press, pinning Stephen Guilbeault to, hey, what is going on with climate change? People are saying that Canada is getting failing grades, and you're saying that we're doing the job. Which is it? What's going on? To be totally honest with this, if we look at the almost non-existent party now, the Green Party, we're actually going to see a little more of the truth and what's happening, and that means that Canada, we're not really getting the job done as far as climate change is concerned. Has not a lot to do with the clean fuel or not to clean the fuel. It doesn't have a lot to do with the fact that they took away fossil fuel subsidies because they're allowing fossil fuels to charge the end customer for the carbon tax. The carbon tax should be sitting with the fossil fuel and the oil companies. That's where it should be sitting. It shouldn't affect the average consumer at the pump. They're not the big polluter. The big polluter is the big oil and gas companies. Make the tax stick with them. Why should our lives be less affordable because they're polluting and they won't clean up what they are doing? So they shouldn't be allowed to push that tax forward. It should be stopped completely within the production companies. Otherwise, it doesn't really hurt them because they get to collect the money, and then through backdoor subsidies, the money doesn't even leave their pockets to go to the government to build something different. The Liberal government has, through carbon taxing, has actually caused muddy waters, and through those muddy waters, there's been a massive uptick in corporate profits. Long and short of it right there. And it needs to be fixed, and till that problem gets fixed, with that we're going to still see a lot of failing grades as those outside of Canada look at what it is that we're actually doing. So our federal Minister of Environment is just adding mud into the water so that we can't really see what is going on. Anyway, thank you for listening today. You've been listening to me, Michael Clogs, at Depictions Media, and this has been Policy and Rights. Please find that subscribe button wherever you may see it and get continued updates from us. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.